a lot more bipartisanship on both sides would be to actually address these issues in depth. In depth. Now, the other day we had a fairly long informational hearing in business practices, business and professions, and I thank the chair for that. That's what we should be doing most of the time. We learn just a little bit and then we leave it. We leave it. What about engineers and scientists? In this state, the technological center of the globe, we don't have enough Americans, much less Californians. They're having to go overseas. Do we talk about how we improve science and technology education in our schools? Yeah, we mention it. It's in a bill and we mention it. We give a little lip service. What's not in the budget is fixing these problems. They are alluded to. We'll go back to the bill factory. What we need to do, and I call on this legislature to do, is to stop the bill factory. All of us, I've got my bills too, stop them and actually address these problems. The unemployment problem, which is enormous, and the revenue problem, which has given rise to what we're talking about here, is because in addition to the national recession, we have jobs and economic investment flowing out of the state as fast as it can. When Intel announces a $7 billion investment to build chip factories in Arizona, New Mexico, even Oregon, do we call them up? Do we say, Intel, please tell us, what can we do? Of course not. It just is something that happens. We heard about it when NUMMI left. Those jobs and that economic investment, unless we change that, we'll be dealing with this year after year after year, even after the recession gets better. What we need to do, and I hope all my colleagues think about this, because I know some of you have thought about reducing the number of bills so we can do this, is address these problems in a bipartisan manner so we can help save California. Thank you.
Senator De Leon.
Go ahead. Thank you very much, Madam President. I rise in support of SB 69, but I do so only because it's the prudent action to take at this moment in time, because we must act with immediacy. Our focus should be on executing a budget plan that's both responsible and balanced, so we can get back to the business of rebuilding California and getting this economy moving again. But before we do that, we have a historic decision to make, whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or sometime next week. The decision or the issue before each and every one of us today is whether the citizens of our own distinctive communities throughout the state of California will have the right to determine the fate of their own future. And it is stunning to me that the question of letting the people vote is even a question on the table today. In recent weeks, we've all witnessed, collectively, men, women, and young children who are risking their lives in several Middle East countries for the right of self-determination. Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen. These men and women, like you and I, want the same things in life: the right to self-determination and the right to democracy. But as we contemplate making very painful and difficult decisions that what undoubtedly will harm the most vulnerable citizens, we're stuck and we're mired in budget partisanship. That may deny the citizens, Republicans, Democrats, decline the states, and otherwise, the right to exercise their voice and determine their own fate and future. The founders of this nation built a nation based on the democratic principles that have served as a beacon of hope and inspiration for other nations across the world for the last 2.5 centuries. These very same guiding principles, these democratic principles, have guaranteed a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. They have bestowed on each and every one of us, elected officials, non-elected officials, in this nation, in this state, under this dome, the unalienable right to make our own decisions and not have tyrants or a small minority decide the fate for them. We collectively, Republicans, Democrats, and otherwise, should respect our founding fathers and make sure that each and every individual has that right to make the decisions for themselves. We owe it to all Californians. Now, our budget chair has articulated quite eloquently $12.5 billion in cuts. These are real, genuine, and these are very painful cuts. We have here, which for me is very, very difficult and painful to read, even incomprehensible, because I'm very angry. I'm very angry at the fact that the decisions we make today are going to hurt children. They're going to hurt the most vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled. They're going to hurt single mothers. $150 million in cuts to developmentally disabled persons in California. What does that mean specifically for me? For Mrs. Garcia in Boyle Heights, in my community, that means that this woman who's a senior citizen won't receive the slightest respite, so she can leave her own house, where today she feels trapped like a prisoner, just to run a simple errand. What it means for Marta Velasquez, who also lives in Boyle Heights, who has a son who's paraplegic, who is a legal permanent resident, as she is a United States citizen, naturalized citizen. That means the cut in the provider rate for her means she won't have enough to take care of a son who's being fed through a G-tube. Now, I visited her personally. These are real cuts. These are not, as was utilized the word, phony cuts. These are real lives. These are real human beings. And my greatest fear is that this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. I believe it was yesterday that our budget chair articulated that if you factor in inflation with population growth, our budget should be roughly at $117.5 billion. It is roughly about $35 billion less. $35 billion less. So since 2007, we have actually been making very dramatic and real cuts that have affected the lives of everyday individuals, Democrats, Republicans, and otherwise. So let's not fool ourselves with regard to the severity of the draconian cuts that are about to ensue quite shortly. I'm interested, just like everyone else, to do everything possible to stimulate our economy and create jobs. But what's at stake here is something that, in my mind, is deadly serious. As we move forward with this argument and debate, now, I have a lot of respect for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I've served with a handful of you on the Assembly side, and at a very personal level, I have nothing but deep respect. We have some very serious decisions to make, but I deeply fear that this is only the beginning for us as a collective body unless we come to some resolution. And what I would say is we have to let the people vote. We owe it to them. We owe it to every individual. We have to respect the founding principles of this great democracy. Madam President, again, I just want to reiterate my support, as difficult as it is, for SB 69. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Emerson.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the Senate. Earlier this afternoon, one of my colleagues from the inland Southern California region that I respect very much, who is a fellow conferee, challenged Republicans with, I think, items A through G. I'm going to challenge my colleagues here today with item H. Let's have an honest budget here in California. And to my good friend who just spoke about Republicans, Democrats, and otherwise, I may be a member of the otherwise party pretty damn soon. But I want to talk to you about an honest budget. We made a general fund reduction of $500 million to the University of California in the conference committee. And then we turned right around and gave an increase to the employees at the University of California just after they had collectively bargained an increase for the next year in California. And we're saying to students in California, we can't support you like we should, and then you turn around and outside of collective bargaining, raise the salaries of people at the University of California. That's not right, and we should all be ashamed of those kinds of actions.
Senator Evans.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I've heard a number of issues raised on this floor today, and I wish I could respond to each and every one of them because I think they do deserve responses one way or the other. So I'll just concentrate on a few things that I think need to be said. First of all, we're not here in the fourth year of this unprecedented worldwide economic crisis because California is overtaxed. In fact, study after study after study has shown that the overall tax burden in the state of California is about average within the United States. We are here, as I said, because of an unprecedented worldwide economic meltdown. And it's not California's first year of this crisis, nor is it our second year, nor is it our third year. It is our fourth year. And we are continuing to struggle to come to grips with it. But something we have to remember that's really important, and I think that we're forgetting, the United States is not broke. The state of California is not broke. The state of California is one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest society that the world has ever seen in world history. Think about that for a minute. We have enormous wealth at our disposal. It's just that politically we choose not to use it. And somebody here earlier talked about fair share, and I know that people have talked about many different occasions about shared sacrifice. The sacrifice being reflected in this budget is not shared, not even close to being shared, nor has it ever been shared. The sacrifices reflected in this budget fall most heavily upon the most vulnerable in our society. And history will judge our society by how we treat our most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable in our society is our children. And it is our children that are bearing the burdens of the sacrifices called for in this budget. Make no mistake about it. It's our children and our children's children. And it is happening in numerous different ways, whether it is cutbacks to K through 12 education, if not in this budget, at least in the last three. It is cutbacks to UC and CSU and community colleges. It is, in many cases, shortening the school year, shortening the school day, increasing college tuition, shutting down enrollment in colleges throughout the state, closing down state parks or parts of parks, which are not only places for outdoor recreation, but also carry our history, our state's proud history that our school children used to take annual field trips to, but no longer can. So we are cutting them in other ways as well. CalWORKs cuts fall primarily on children. Healthy Families cuts fall primarily on children. And I can go on and on. You all know I can. The list is legion. So don't tell me that this reflects Democratic priorities. I am a proud progressive Democrat. This budget in no way reflects my priorities, except one. And that one is the one reason I can find myself to vote for it. I will vote for it because it seeks to close an unprecedented $25 billion deficit. And it seeks to do it in a way that voters for years and years have told us that they want to do it. Half through cuts and half through taxes. Poll after poll after poll for years have shown that that's the way the voters want us to address this problem. That is what our governor has put forward. I don't like it. I don't in any way think that this is the way I would propose, and I've heard from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, this is not the way they would approach it, but this is the way that we have been asked to approach it. This is the way the governor has put forward, and for that reason, I will support it, and I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Alquist.
Thank you, Madam President. The state of California is about to be foreclosed. We really do have a $25.5 billion deficit. It's not surreal. It is very real. And unless we can make these cuts, and either cuts or cuts with revenues, we will demolish the services of state government that people depend upon. Now, we have spent a lot of time looking at what is it that we could cut. I'm a member of Sub 3, Budget Sub 3, Health and Human Services, and I can tell you, I sat through at least 11 hours, probably more, of hearings and had several hundred people testify, some of whom were my constituents. I remember this lady from Santa Clara who was in a wheelchair. She was disabled. Before she was disabled, had worked really hard all her life, paid taxes. Now she was about 60 years old, and she needed some help from the state. And she cried and cried and cried because now we were not there for her. It was like a contractual agreement. People work hard, they pay taxes, and then at some point, if they need some other kinds of services, the state is supposed to provide them. Well, at this point, we're just dealing with $13.8 billion in cuts. And even, hopefully, if we pass this, we will still have another $13.7 billion that we will have to solve. And then we'll be looking at redevelopment, and in my estimation, hopefully the ability to put a measure on the ballot to help account for the other resources to take care of that the remaining $13.7 billion minus the $1.7 billion for redevelopment. So this is a real issue. If we're not able to solve this problem, the state will have no credibility. Our ratings become that much worse. It costs that much more to borrow money. And more than that, I think we lose hope in this wonderful state that I moved to in 1978. Moved here because really great schools, all these other kinds of things. Well, frankly, we've been able pretty much to protect K-12 in this first go-around. But if we're not able to account for that other $13.7 billion, K-12 is really going to be on the line. And as a former teacher and school board member, college professor, college trustee, I would hate to see us in that position. So we need to pass this. It is just a first step. And I know we are all people of goodwill. I could look any person on this floor, any senator in the eye, and know that that person was a good friend and of good spirit. We have to come together and solve the problem. The people depend on us. I ask for your aye vote.
Any other discussion, members? Senator Anderson, and then I'm going to close with the two leaders, Senator Dutton and then Senator Steinberg.
You know, I've been in the Assembly for 4 years. For 4 years, I have presented bill after bill after bill that chipped away at this issue. And on a straight party line vote, I didn't get an honest hearing. We never even got out of the blocks. I'll give you an example of one of the bills. I said that any committee that hasn't had quorum in over 2 years and that doesn't send a letter to the legislature saying that they're looking to make a quorum would automatically be disbanded. I couldn't get that out of committee. It had to be a study. Don't tell me that we haven't offered suggestions. Don't tell we haven't tried. You know, you can go through it time and time again. All my colleagues have bills that they can point to. How many members on this floor and across the way have bills that cost money to the general fund? I'm not asking you to raise your hand, but we know we're in the room. And to sit here and to say that we really care about these people when we're spending money we don't have, I believe is insincere. You know, some people say, well, why don't you put it on the ballot? Well, I just got elected. I ran, and I'm keeping a campaign pledge. And that pledge to those people, those constituents who voted overwhelmingly for me, it was loud and clear. I understand them. For the members who don't know what their constituents want, we don't have to cost the state a lot of money putting it on the ballot. Spend some time, use your block grant, send out a questionnaire, and see how it returns. Because I think you're going to find overwhelmingly many of your constituents would call it shirking your responsibility. While we've had plenty of times to vote, and I agree with my colleague that it's important for our democracy and for our great state to have those opportunities to vote, let's not shirk our responsibility by putting it off on the voters. Second, or third, you know, I have a deep concern that there's a secret pledge. That many of you may have signed secret pledges and are just not being honest. You know I signed a pledge, and I was honest and transparent with it. And everybody in the press knows that I signed it. But how many of you filled out union questionnaires? And at the bottom, you signed it. And in that questionnaire, and by the way, I got many of those questionnaires, and they were pledges. Oh boy, were they pledges. They asked me specifically what I was going to do and what I was willing to cut and how I was going to get there. And I would challenge all my colleagues to be as transparent with their pledges as my colleagues and I have been with ours. And it's okay if you don't want to sign a pledge. I get that and I respect that. But don't hold a secret pledge and not be honest and transparent. You know, you're right. The state isn't broke. It's broken. On this body and in other bodies of the legislature, I've witnessed for years one job-killing bill after another. Somehow, if you're a corporation and you employ people, or if you're affluent enough to employ somebody, you're a bad person and you need to be put out of business and watched very closely. You know what? I think there needs to be oversight, but let's not forget these are the jobs. These are the taxes that drive the state. These people who are creating jobs aren't our enemies. They're our friends, and we should be embracing them. I know that many of the other states, many of the other governors certainly are. And finally, you know, I recently pointed out some of the problems with Caltrans. Here's a budget. They have a budget of $12.9 billion. They have over 20,000 employees. And on average, they're all making over $100,000. All of them. When you go back from 2007, when this state was I believe, $19 billion in debt, to 2009, when we were, I believe, $22 or $24 billion in debt, Caltrans with their top executives, took over $60,000 worth of raises in that short period of time. When hardworking Californians, when all Californians were suffering at that time, nobody had a problem with them spiking their pensions. And by the way, that dollar figure of over $100,000 does not include the cost of their retirement benefits. Now, those roads and infrastructure, drive up 5, drive up 99. You'll be driving on the left-hand side of the road because you can't drive on the right-hand side without being prepared to pay for a new suspension. It's absolutely outrageous. Californians deserve better. We deserve better. And we have to hold the bar higher. Caltrans isn't going to solve the problem for the general budget. It's not going to solve all that, but it sends a clear signal to all our constituents as long as we allow them not to perform and to continue to pay them and allow them to spike their pensions. And by the way, the LAO said that they have too many employees and they're mismanaged. This is a nonpartisan LAO. Until we can address that issue, until we can address other issues like that, and prove to our constituents and all Californians that we can be good stewards with their money, I don't think that we have any right to be asking people to pay more in taxes on any level. We first need to prove to them that we can be good stewards. And with that, I ask a no vote.
All righty. Any further discussion? Then we're going to go to Senator Dutton, Senator Steinberg, and then Senator Leno. You may close. Senator Dutton.
Madam President and members, when we started this deliberation on the budget, and actually I was I was actually thinking I was almost going to have us read the Constitution of the state of California in the opening of session today, being there was so many comments about voting rights and things of that nature. I kind of thought it might be a good refresher course for all of us. But, I actually thought back to something that I said at the very beginning when I knew that, we were going to have a really tough year. But then I've been here for 8 years, and it seems like every year's been tough. We haven't done a very good job in trying to move California forward and actually create the opportunity that California was so well known for. I made it very clear to a lot of groups early on that I wasn't going to be able to support any of the solutions if at the end of the day, and I put the package all together, I couldn't look my wife in the eye and be able to tell her that, honey, this will fix the problem so I can support it. And I just can't quite get there. I know that there's a lot of work that's been done, but, there's some simple truths about this budget. This budget puts $14 billion worth of new taxes or an extension, whatever your definition may be, for this year alone. It gives you $50 billion in additional taxes over the next 5 years. It also, though, doesn't rein in spending. We're actually going to see a growth of over $26 billion in the budget over that next 3 years. I think there's, all the cuts that you say are being made, we would agree there's about $7 billion in total cuts that'll be made. It depends on your definition of what a cut really is. We do feel that there's about $7.5 billion in gimmicks, but that's nothing new because every year there's always a few gimmicks in there that try to help make things work. So that wasn't too unusual. Early on, I also heard, though, that I think we're the party of no. When I look at this proposal that's before us, what I see is no plan to put people back to work, no pension reform. Maybe we should put that on the ballot, give the people a chance to vote for pension reform. No spending cap, no changing government as usual. So I'm not sure really who the party of no is. This is more like the legislature of no. And I think we are letting down the people of California. I said a long time ago, about 5-6 years ago, I started trying to focus on what I thought was important on helping to save California, and that was unemployment was a big concern. Do you know that we now rank number 2, though, in having the highest unemployment in the state in the country? We finally beat out Michigan. Okay, we're now number 2, they're number 3. We only have to overtake Nevada before we're number one. You know, the best social program you'll provide somebody is a good paying job. And we're just not doing a very good job in creating that opportunity for anybody. We are wiping the middle class out of California. We're driving them out of this state. And you're not going to provide an opportunity for the economically challenged to climb a ladder and be successful unless you somehow reestablish the opportunity for the middle class to exist and to actually give an opportunity for a ladder for them, for the poor and the challenged to be able to climb this ladder. A lot of this is regulatory relief. I can't tell you the number of companies that have told me they can handle a little bit higher cost to do business in California. Frankly, it's worth it. But it's the regulatory environment that's strangling us. And yet we just keep piling more stuff on. And any proof of that, just take a look at what's been introduced in the Assembly just this last session. Most of it was vetoed last year for being anti-jobs or anti-business type legislation. When Toyota was leaving to California and heading off to Texas, closing down the Fremont plant, I remember a resolution being presented by my colleague Elaine Corbett that said we should do everything possible to keep all these jobs here. Yet what do? We keep piling more stuff on, more costs of doing business. That's what's causing this problem. So with all due respect, I know everybody's worked hard. We're tired. We still got a lot of work to do. I've been at this for 8 years now, because every year I've been here, we've been in a crisis. But like I said at the beginning, and I'm going to say to my wife at home, who I know is watching, honey, this just won't do it. And I can't support it, and I'm going to encourage everybody to vote against it.
Senator Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank all of the members who spoke and all of those who did not, but who have participated in this budget debate. Today we will pass one of the earliest budgets in California history, and it would be easy as the leader here to get up and do a point-counterpoint to all of the different things that have been said, but I choose not to do that to every point. Instead, to try to put our challenge here as senators, each representing nearly 1 million people, in some perspective. I was listening especially to the public safety debate during the public safety realignment discussion and wondered whether these difficult decisions are really a catch between two conflicting values. And I don't mean conflicting values between Democrats and Republicans. I mean two conflicting values internal to the members that have doubts about this plan. For representative government requires us to make choices. We don't just get to put our point of view out there and then not reconcile when we have a conflict between the things that we believe. And the fact of the matter is, we're here in part because if some members of one party don't make choices, or if some members, period, don't make choices that result in the numbers, in this case $27.5 billion, to add up, the people rightfully ask, what are you doing up there? My colleagues on the other side of the aisle acknowledge that the cuts we've made over the last 2 days are deep and painful. And as you speak about boards and commissions and efficiencies, nothing that you have suggested adds up to the $12.5 billion that the governor and the majority party ask you to put before the people. As you speak about pensions, you fail to acknowledge that 40% of the Republican caucus last year, when we had the opportunity, in fact, did roll back SB 400, which was the big Gray Davis pension increase, 40% of the Republican caucus failed to vote for that. And so as a matter of simple mathematics, How do the efficiencies, the reforms, the elimination of commissions, many of which we've done, but we could, of course, do more, how does that add up to the $12.5 billion that the governor and the majority party seek to put before the people? And then you look at the key question: what happens if the people don't have a choice? What happens if the people aren't allowed to vote? And it's easy for any partisan politician to get up and claim that the sky is going to fall. And that's why it's so important that the only impartial analyst we know, the legislative analyst, puts out a letter, which I recall Senator Huff and other leading members of the minority party responding without severe criticism of the report itself. It's acknowledged as fairly accurate. When you look at what the impact would be of not giving people the choice, we talk about public safety, to get back to Senator Harman's argument and others' arguments. The LAO says that we will have to keep low-level offenders in the community. We will have to eliminate parole. But we'll have to do all of that without any resources for local public safety officials to be able to administer anything. Why is that a good result for public safety? On education, the legislative analyst tells us that we will probably have to make cuts to the tune of $5 billion. Many ways, I'm sure, to do that, none of them pleasant. I know in my district and in districts, I'm sure, throughout your state, they're already taking conditional votes to eliminate extracurricular activities, to lay off teachers. We do know that $5 billion represents, if you do the simple math, $200 million a day to cut a day off of school instruction. If you went that route, that's 25 days. That's 5 weeks of school plain gone. Higher education, another $1 billion. The LAO tells us we would have to cut. For every $100 million, we deny almost 10,000 young people admission to the University of California and over 13,000 young people admittance to the California State University system. Which leads me to my last point, and it is in response to my friend Senator Strickland and others. Senator Strickland said, our priorities, speaking for the party, are with the people of California. And I believe you are sincere. And when the question gets asked, are Republicans relevant? I'm kind of offended by the question, because to me, Republicans are relevant because you have a legitimate point of view on a lot of issues, and you represent 1 million people, and the system, especially what remains of the two-thirds system, gives you a voice. But I would remind you, not in any kind of an arrogant manner or in any boastful fashion, that elections matter. We had an election several months ago, and the people resoundingly elected Governor Brown over Meg Whitman, who had a very different philosophy. The people returned strong Democratic majorities to both houses. The people elected 5 statewide Democratic elected officials. And so as we go forward with, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, as we go forward in the difficult days ahead, I hope that we can agree on proportionality. In other words, you get up on the floor and you say, this is the way we think the world should be, and this is what we think is wrong with California. All right. We agree with some of it. We don't agree with all of it. And so whether it's 5 members or the entire caucus, whoever is going to engage in the discussions with us over the days ahead as we try to reach a resolution, I would urge you to recognize that in order to get this done, because you can't answer the $12.5 billion question, nobody can other than what is really before us, that you acknowledge that elections matter. And that as we talk about pensions, again, an issue by evidence from last year you actually have some concerns with. As we talk about spending restraint, which we're willing to talk about, as we talk about regulatory reform, that your demands and your asks be proportional in some way to your representation here in this body and in California. Otherwise, the people are going to say, what are you all doing up there? The field poll yesterday indicated very strongly that the majority of Californians and even the majority of Republicans believe that this question of giving the people the right to vote should be on the ballot. So use your power, use your leverage, appropriate, but do it in a way that is proportional to what the people have said the public policy should be here in California. I urge an aye vote on this budget, one of the earliest budgets in state history, and let's finish the job over the next several days. Thank you.
Senator Leno, close. Senator Blake, I asked for the end of the discussion. Do you have a question? Briefly.
Sorry to take up so much time with a question of such minor import. Were a number of us who did step forward and accepted the governor's challenge to enter into a difficult conversation about the decisions that face this state. And notwithstanding the arguments of proportionality and the need for us to be modest in our desires to fix the state of California, we're also mindful of a letter by the Legislative Analyst's Office and Ledge Council, which, as one such comment identified in response to Mark Leno's question about how further cuts could be achieved, Ledge Council also said there is a way for the majority party to put their taxes on the ballot with a majority vote. This is not a question about how to move the state forward. This is a question about whether we're going to work in a bipartisan effort, have bipartisan reforms that include some of the reforms that fix the state of California. We are long overdue for a spending cap. Fix the state of California, deal with fiscal insolvency that imperils our ability to pay public workers the pensions they're owed, fiscal solvency that allows us to bring jobs back to California. And we are willing to step up and make hard decisions that end our careers, but not to provide a fig leaf of political cover that does not fix the problems of the state of California. Now, when I find someone on the other side of the aisle who's willing to engage me in that conversation about making equally hard decisions that break with the status quo, I'll be ready to end my career and do what's right for moving the state forward by fixing these problems. But I've been here for too many years and too many budget drills, year after year, being told we do not have time to fix the problems of the state of California. Hurry up and vote on this half-baked, non-substantive fix that just has us limp along from year to year. So I understand this is a blue state. And I accept that I only have one vote. But I'm going to cast that vote with integrity. And when the real reforms are placed in front of me that actually fix these problems, I'll be happy to join my friends on the other side of the aisle. Until then, I suggest they use Ledge Council's opinion. They can move forward on a one-party solution because they do not want to work with their colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Until that time, I will ask for a no vote.
Anything further, members? Senator Leno, I invite you to close.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues. Especially want to thank all of those who served on the Budget Committee and on budget subcommittees. We had literally dozens and dozens of hearings to review the governor's January proposal. want to thank my vice chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Senator Bob Huff, for being a great partner through that very long, intensive, and comprehensive program. I also want to thank all of our staff on both sides of the aisle. We often talk about how, due to term limits, we all come and go, but the institutional knowledge remains with the staff. We could not do it without all of that knowledge that we likely will never have the opportunity to gain. I also want to just briefly refine, not retract, but refine a comment I made earlier regarding the public safety realignment bill. All of the public safety entities we mentioned in support, we do have support letters. I'm told I should refine my comment to say it is support in concept, which means, in fact, everything but about this much. There are still discussions going on with the governor to tweak and to refine the very last details of it. So I want to make that clear, but at the same time, we do have support letters. I will be very cautious in my comments, only to make statements of fact, but I do need to respond to a couple of the things that have been said in our debate today. But I'll get to that in just a second. I do want to reiterate some things I said when I made my initial presentation in these budget talks just a few days ago. In fact, this budget is 18%, as proposed, 18% smaller than our budget of 3 years ago. It is 24% smaller, a full quarter reduced from our budget of just 5 years ago. This is, in fact, an ever-shrinking general fund budget. And it also represents spending of our general fund per California income, a lower rate than when Governor Schwarzenegger was in office, when Governor Wilson was in office, when Governor Duke Majan was in office. It's never been as lean as going back to 1972 when Ronald Reagan was in office. And that's just a fact. Let's also keep in mind, because I heard some comment about this is all about Democratic profligate spending. The past 23 of 28 years, California has had Republican governors who have introduced their budgets, and after the legislature reviewed it and had it on his desk, had full line item veto to cut out everything and anything that those governors of the past 28 years, all 23 years of them, didn't want to see. And all of those budgets were passed with 2/3 majority votes. Again, just a fact. If it's a fact that Democrats have secretly signed pledges to unions, I don't know that that's true, but if it's true, all and every one of those pledges will be broken today when we vote for this budget, because nothing short of K through 12 is being spared. Everything is taking a serious hit. And with regard to pension reform, 90% of my Democratic colleagues just last year voted for the most significant pension reform this building has seen literally in decades. As Senator Steinberg has pointed out, 90% of us repealing SB 400, rolling back the pension benefits of 1999. 40%, as Senator Steinberg said, of Republican colleagues did not. And that's just a fact, including the current leader. There are no tax increases. There are no tax increases in this budget. And with regard to the issue of job loss here in California, according to the Department of Finance, a whopping 1.2% of job loss in California is due to businesses leaving the state. 1.2% of job loss. So I will make an offer, a sincere offer, that anyone here on either side of the aisle who does not support allowing the voters to say whether or not they support the governor's proposal to put forward their $72 billion rather than $84 billion budget. And we will spend minimally a full day in our budget committee to hear that $72 billion budget presented. And that, I think, is the only responsible response to opposition to the governor's proposal. We've got a newly elected governor. I think it's appropriate that that governor's proposal has a chance. And as he said in his campaign, he would only support revenue supported by the voters, and that's what he's being proposed now, keeping that campaign pledge. And you certainly have a right not to support it, but that, by definition, means a $72 billion budget. We'll give you a whole day hearing, if not more, so we can review it and let Californians see what it looks like. These are tough times, folks. This is a serious attempt to right the ship of state. It's a balanced approach, as the governor said in his inaugural address. He's not here to delay or to deny. I think that's exactly what we're doing, addressing the challenges that California faces straight on. And I would ask for an aye vote.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alquist. Aye. Anderson. No. Berryhill. Blakesley. No. Calderon. Aye. Canella. No. Corbett. Aye. Correa. Aye. De Leon. Aye. DeSaulnier. Aye. Dutton. No. Emerson. No. Evans. Aye. Fuller. No. Gaines. No. Hancock. Aye. Harmon. No. Hernandez. Aye. Huff. No. Kehoe.
Aye.
Aye. LaMalfa. No. Leno. Aye. Ted Lieu. Aye. Carol Lieu. Aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Negrete McLeod. Aye. Padilla. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Price. Aye. Rubio. Aye. Runner. No. Smidian. Aye. Steinberg. Aye. Strickland. No. Vargas. Aye. Walters. No. Wolk. Aye. Wright. Aye. Wyland. No. Yee. Yee, aye.
Call the absent members.
Berryhill. No. Madam President.
Members, ayes 25, noes 15. The conference report is adopted. Senator Correa, for what purpose?
Yeah, without objection, I'd like to request an immediate hearing in room 3191 of the Elections Committee to hear one bill.
Elections Committee in room 391 immediately. 3191, excuse me. And then, members, we're returning to the floor to take up that bill very briefly, and then we still have appropriations. And Senator Steinberg.
Thank you, Madam President. We have to come back to vote on the urgency elections bill, and then we can adjourn, and the remaining committees can meet after adjournment.
So we're waiting
Senator Steinberg, just one moment.
We're wait on elections?
No, elections is going in now. Elections is going in now. We're returning to the floor. And then The urgency measures adopted, ayes 35, no 0. The measures adopted. And Senator Calderon. And Senator Calderon requests immediate transmittal to the Assembly. Members, that, I think, concludes our floor business. Appropriations will meet in 4203 immediately. And Rules Committee is meeting immediately in 3191.
Can he determine them all?
Senator Harman, for what purpose, please? Members, a little more
purpose of announcement of the schedule for the remainder of the week.
Please proceed.
At the request of Pro Tem, the members will be on call with the Pro Tem on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Monday, we will have floor session at noon.
Thank you, Senator Harman. Members, on call tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, noon session. Thank you, Senator Harman. Appropriations is meeting now in 4203, and Rules is meeting in 3191. We're recessed.